Good afternoon. It's Joyful Christian Mystic Hermit. I think it's recording. I just had a lot of trouble with my laptop, trying to get it to even turn off, to close. I had to do it manually then. My pain is very high. I had trouble with my new phone. I started that video. I did a video on this topic outside when it was lovely and the dogs were enjoying the nice day, but my phone just shut off. So my pain definitely is interfering. Mercy, no, I can't handle anything right now. We've been outside. We just have to wait, honey. I'm sorry. Here's this prayer I found. I'm sure some of you have heard it before. It's just on a little slip of paper. I've been finding little boxes with little holy cards in and different slips of paper, things I'd saved. Some woman years ago gave it to me. Actually, a very lovely woman who loved talking with me on the phone. She had had to move from the hometown, as I did, and live near her adult children. But I was too much for her. She couldn't take it. But instead of just saying, I can't handle your conversations, she just cut off and wouldn't answer the phone anymore. I'd send her a note, she wouldn't respond. And I checked obituary, she hadn't died, but I knew that the temporal Catholic world was too much. I was working through grief of situations, and even here of the reality of everywhere. God kept closing the doors to me, to the Catholic Church, but no, not the Catholic Church, not Christ's church that he instituted, but to the created temporal stuff that humans had created and call the Catholic Church. So it's really been a miracle that I didn't want to bother with this other lady anymore, with her freaking out that I would call myself a Catholic hermit, because I am. But she has all of her reasons why you can't do that. And she's the hermit queen. So, thinks she is, and is calling the shots, thinks she is. And that's fine. But I thought, just avoid it. So that's when I put Christian in. I thought, well, originally the Catholic Church was called Christian Church. And in my unasked for opinion, it should have remained the Christian Church in the 1st and 2nd century. People should have just plowed through and remained Christian. Other people could call them Catholic. They were doing it intentionally because other people who weren't Christians did not even want to utter a word that contained Christ in it. So they came up with calling Christians Catholics instead. And the Pope at the time, Clement I, the leader, they didn't give him the title of Pope until many centuries later, but at that time he was the leader, and he wrote out a letter to all the churches in the different countries, Greece, Turkey, Jerusalem, different areas where the church had established, Northern Africa, and said, just go along with it. Don't battle, don't. And I don't think that people needed to battle over it or insist, but among themselves retain the name Christian Church, Christians, instead of Catholic, because look at the problem now. Now it has been mistaken by other Christian churches who came with the Reformation in 1526, that they consider Catholics then not Christian. Well, and it stands to reason. Why wouldn't they call themselves Christian? Why do they call themselves Catholic if they're really Christians, see? So we should have retained that name. They need to take it back. Remove Catholic from all parishes and put Christian. St. Mark's Christian Church. Holy Apostles Christian Church, St. Joseph Christian Church, St. Mary's Christian Church. Get rid of Catholic. I do. That's why I changed my site to Christian, Joyful Christian Mystic Hermit. And it solved the issue of the person who's so obsessed, a temporalite, an extreme temporalite. And it gave me freedom just to be rid of that hanging over. And yes, I mean, I could write to my bishop. He would tell me, yes, go ahead and call yourself Catholic. You're Catholic. The rector and vicar general and running the diocese back in the Midwest initially said, well, call your blog. He liked it. I was writing. I mean, he liked me. He knew me. He knew I had these inner sight, and that was unnerving to him because he liked control. He was a temporal person who needed control over things, and he did. He had so many things he was in charge of that he needed to be organized and to have a sense of control. So I don't blame him for how he needed to run his personal life, his administrative life to be successful. He needed to be organized ultra and in control over this and that situation. Granted, he did, because that's how you have to be handling temporal problems. And even though, like the priest here who said, oh, don't even consider doing anything with the diocese, he says, it's shackles. It's nothing but shackles. You will regret it. Keep yourself free. And I realized with his life, mine was enviable to him. To freely be able to embrace the spiritual totally and not have to be an administrator of the temporal Catholic world, of which so many people, that's all they know. They've been brought up in that, and that's all they know, and they haven't moved out of it. So I know that's some of what God wants me to do. Because years ago, 1988, when all of these mystical experience, everything was just opening up, God was opening up the universe, opening up my life to the spiritual in huge ways. And he said, this isn't just for you. It's for everyone. It's for everyone. So that's part of my life. And my purpose now is to help with the spiritual and share the spiritual. So that's what I'm dedicating myself to as best I can, and inspire people to learn, love the spiritual life, follow the spiritual life, swim on out into the deep, embrace the spiritual of the church, embrace pure love of God, embrace the reality that the Holy Trinity dwells within us and guides our life. The Holy Trinity. What was that? Oh, I don't know who that is. I'm not going to worry about it for now. So, I had to let that older woman go. I was too much. It was too much. Where I was too much. So we have to be willing to let loose of those who can't handle that we're swimming out into the deep. And a lot of people fear. They have a sense they need to have their feet on ground in the water. It's difficult to swim and not touch ground for some people. But way back in 2005, I was given a vision dream, and it was another powerful one. And I was shown a pool at first. It was just started out with the pool, with the sides and the shallow end. And I was told by God, get out of the shallow end. Swim on out into the deep. Let go of the sides of the pool and help other people to let go and to get out of the shallow end. Swim to the deep end, I was told. Get them to swim out into the deep end and not fear. So then I had this other, this other one was a dream vision also, but even more impactful then, after the pool and the, let go of the edges and get others to walk out into the deeper end of the pool. It ended up then being just vast waters, and I was swimming over a very deep part of a body of water. And the weeds were so deep coming up from the bottom, and so thick I could see them as I swam just under the surface of the water. These strong weeds that were sort of swaying underneath, but came up, and I couldn't touch bottom. It was so deep. I couldn't see bottom. I couldn't sense it. It was deep. I was like in a big hole of water, a depth of water. And then I could sense that if I swam further, I would get out of that deep pit, a natural earth pit that had filled in with water, and then the rest was all body of water, for as far as I could see. But I swam a little further, and there were people entangled in this huge net, big, thick, like, probably 2-inch thick rope of a net. And bodies, naked bodies, were in that net. The weeds were growing up, it's in this deep part still, but all of these naked bodies were in that net, tangled, and just fighting and tumbling all over each other, trying to escape. And I'd gotten further beyond the net. The net was behind me, but people were in it, and I was trying to free them desperately to save their lives. And so I was facing shore, but here was this huge net with all of these thrashing naked bodies trying to get out. They were so tangled up in the net, just beneath the surface of the water, gasping and trying to claw their way up over bodies so that they could reach the surface to get air. But they were all entangled, and then the weeds had grown up through the net also. So it was a nightmare vision, that part was. But a voice said, "Stop. I'll take care of them. You can't. Swim on out into the deep. Swim on out into the deep. Stop doing this. Stop trying. You won't be able to do it. You'll only drown yourself." So I stopped and I started I turned away from the nets and all those people that were in serious terminal trouble. But I knew it was God, and I did what he said. And I realized I couldn't help either. I was helpless against the weeds, against the thrashing of the people, entangling and tumbling, and their legs and their arms and grasping, trying to reach net to climb up and over each other. And I was like helpless to do anything with them. Me, just one person outside the net. And they weren't even paying attention to me, these people. They weren't even saying, "Oh, help me, I'll cooperate." No, they were just desperately clamoring and grasping and gasping and lost. So but God will help them. So I started swimming out, and I just kept swimming and swimming, and I would try to put my foot down, thinking, well, I'd got to a more shallow area. No, I could never put my foot down. I would sort of stop and tread water to sort of get my bearings and try to even, cope. And I would look and look. I could see no shoreline, nothing. But the voice would say, keep swimming, just keep swimming. So I just kept swimming and swimming and swimming. Finally, off in the distance, I could barely see what looked like shoreline way over. And that was when, that was when I came out of this vision, woke up or whatever we'd call. But I was okay. But I was able to swim. I was able to keep going. And it was quite something. I told my spiritual father about it later. I think I had the shallow end of the pool. I had that dream and an important message, to get people to swim out into the deep end of a pool. Let go of the sides. Let go and go to God, and God will take us from there. It was in Avila, Spain, where I had this message, this dream, this vision. And then later, I think it was still in Avila, Spain, that I had that other intense one where, I was literally trying to help people entangled in the nets. And I call that vision the entangling nets. But that was the one that I did what God said, and I swam out into the deep. Swam and finally saw in the distance the shoreline. But I never did touch bottom. But it was okay. I didn't have a fear. Nothing bad happened. I just kept swimming and finally saw off in the distance the shore. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was all good then. So, and I was going to be all right. I knew that. But I knew even then I was to keep swimming, not ever worry about not touching bottom. It wasn't going to matter. I was fully protected. I was able to swim no matter what. I wasn't going to drown. I was in a spiritual realm, but yet in the world. I wasn't in heaven. I hadn't had ecstasies yet. This was back in 2005, summer of 2005. And so ecstasy started the end of August 2008, where I had the bliss of the ecstasies, which is the closest to being in heaven that I can describe to anyone. But it's very important to not fear the spiritual. Don't fear it. And even though we aren't touching ground, and here's another thing that came up, someone I was emailing with, that whole notion of approval. Here's a poem. Here's this poem I was going to read to you. But it's not approved by the church. I don't know if I have anything else here that's approved by the church or not approved. It doesn't matter. The spiritual life doesn't have to be approved or disapproved. It belongs to God. The spiritual journey, the holy narrow pathway, the scriptures, they belong to God. They don't need a human being's approval. So, something like what I'm talking about, it doesn't require approval of the Vatican or whoever you'd even go to for approval. Like when I was years ago, back in 2006, talking about starting a blog. And Reverend Monsignor said, well, call it the Catholic Hermit. You're Catholic. You're writing about hermits. You're a hermit. Call it Catholic Hermit. He liked that title. I did too. It didn't need any approval. Being a hermit never needed any approval. Only God's approval. That's all. The titles of my poems didn't need any approval. They just came to me from the Holy Spirit. See, when we have the Holy Trinity dwelling within us, that's who approves if there's needed approval. If it's something to do with a canon law or starting a religious order where humans have made up rules centuries ago even, the Vatican has a protocol for what you must do if you want to start a new order. You have to contact some propagation of the religious order sector or society or whatever it's called. Somebody at your diocese would know what to contact or who to contact, or Google it and ask, I want to start a religious order. Who do I get permission from? Or how do I find out the steps? Because they have a whole lot of steps. And back in 2005, where I was staying in Avila, they were a new society. And they'd already been 30 years in process. They had already been through one step of it, one approval process, and it takes years and years to get your final approval. And you have to prove this and that and keep paperwork and have so many members join. And you have to have a process by which they join. You have to have your statutes, your plan, what you plan to do that's different from other religious orders that are already out there. You have to show that you're doing something different that's needed. And it's like a proposal. It's like a business plan. It's like if somebody wants to start a corporation. You have to develop your business plan. You have to pay money, get loans, and startup money. You have to have startup money. You have to have people with you doing it. People who are going to be in the corporation or the society or the religious order. You have to do a market analysis. Are there other religious orders that are like my idea? Oh, there are. Well, are they in other countries? Oh, no. Well, I could start it in Australia, or I could start it in Africa. That would be, I'd be safe. Oh, does this other group have plans to expand to those countries? Oh, yes. Oh, well, no, then I can't. Well, let me find another country. Or let me change my plan a little bit. Come up with something unique. A hook. It's called a hook. A new invention. Something different. And then it has to have appeal to the people at the Vatican in the ones who determine, give the approvals for starting religious orders. It has to have some kind of a unique appeal of what it's going to do for the church. Because, why would they want to have just some other similar group or one that isn't really that relevant or going to do much good for the church? So you got to figure it out. Creative. Come up with something clever and different and new, but feasible. Have your ducks in order. Have your money lined up to pay your fees, your startup fees, and your permits. It's like getting a business permit from the Vatican. And then you live it and develop it for, I think the first phase was 30 years. Then they had another phase of 30 years that they were just getting ready to start. I think the person then, they started it in the 70s or something. Or maybe, the idea of this one priest was in the 60s, and he had to do a lot of preliminary work and get like-minded people to join with him. who would be excited about his ideas, because you can't start it without your little group to start with, your seed group, your founding group. So this is sort of the current way, unless it's changed even more so since 1960s and 70s. And so that was in 2005. They still wouldn't be finished with the second part. It was going to be later in the century, this century, before they could get their final approval, if everything went well. And each step of the way, they had to pay more fees. It's like getting licenses. And then you have inspections. They inspect your paperwork. They inspect your facility. They interview the different people. They do a real background check on the people who are the head of it, the founding person, and those others like the superior or the associate superior or the novice master or mistress. And if it's this particular group was male and female, and they were partially contemplative group, but also active. They had places for both types of people in it. So that was good because it appealed to more people that way. And the more broad base you can get, the more lucky you are to get people to join. Because in our times, people aren't really doing that much joining of religious orders or societies. Societies of the faithful, they're called. Societies of the Christian faithful. So they did a lot of work, and they had a house in Toledo, Spain, and the one in Avila. And the person I was close to there and emailed, I think she's passed away, and did probably within a year after I left, because she stopped contacting back. The last I heard from her back in later 2005, she was very, very ill, not doing well, and had been taken back to the house in Toledo where she could be better cared for by the other people in this startup group. And they went without being approved. But they still called themselves sister and brother. They still called themselves by the title of their startup group, society, because they'd gotten their initial permission like 30 years prior from the Vatican. So, technically, I have permission from my bishop here. He knows I'm here. He wrote me this beautiful letter, which unfortunately I now don't have, but he probably has a copy in his office. Maybe I should write and get it. It was beautiful. He said that he liked the path I was on, the traditional historic hermit life. He said, continue on in the hermit life that you've already lived. At that time, it was 20 years, because I wrote to him 6 years ago, this past spring, so a year ago. So he was very much for that. He didn't really see the need for the diocese hermit thing himself. But when I reapplied, he had to honor the application last summer. Was it a year ago last summer? But he assigned the young priest. I still feel I need to write to the bishop and tell him why I couldn't go along with it, why I knew God did not want it for me. But I want to tell him that if anyone else applies for diocese, to get an older priest and one who knows about hermits and who has the time to even meet the hermit. He didn't even meet me. And you just don't give over obedience blindly to someone who hasn't even taken 5 minutes to see your eyeballs or to see that you're a real person. How would he know? Or the chancellor. I could have been a bum writing to them and saying all this stuff. They would have no idea. Over internet, I could have been a hermit scammer, just doing it for a joke, or just to see what would happen. or, just be a total fraud. And he was putting me in this year program, but of things I physically couldn't do, but yet also things that weren't even hermit vocation, according to the catechism, according to their canon law. It wasn't equivalent. It wasn't being hidden. It didn't include solitude or silence, what he was wanting me to do. So he was confused. He didn't have a clue about what a real hermit was, historically, traditionally, or why you would have solitude, silence, and hiddenness. So, and not be in a parish. He did not understand an ecstasy at all. He thought it was of the devil. He didn't listen that it had already been discerned by a bishop and priests and a vicar general and chancellor. It's already been discerned, and by a psychologist, clinical psychologist. So, and my spiritual father and another priest. So, and the bishop. No, it's not of the devil. It's not, So, it was just bizarre. And that's how I knew God didn't want me to have anything to do with it. And it'll be that way. I wonder if in 100 years it'll even be a thing, or it'll still be, but it'll still be the mess it is now, of different diocese hermits just sort of doing their thing, depending on what the bishops allow them to do, which in one case, the bishop doesn't even know this person's in his diocese, doing whatever she wants, and making up things about what hermits do, diocese hermits do. So, see, that's part of the temporal Catholic world. That's just so different than swimming out into the deep of the spiritual. It has nothing to do, really, with the narrow pathway that Jesus says. Take this narrow path. It is narrow, and few are they who are on it, but choose to go that path. And it's in Scripture how to live the holy narrow pathway. And in the previous video, I mentioned some books to read if you want more information in addition to the Scriptures, which I think is a good idea because it brings it more to contemporary times within the last couple of 100 years. And also, like Father Reginald Garrigou Lagrange, The 3 Ways of the Spiritual Life, gives a total overview of the progression of the soul, of anyone's soul, and how to keep that progression going. And Dom Marmion's book, Columba Marmion, his book, Christ, the Life of the Soul, is another one that will flesh out in real time, in practical ways, in accessible reading, to help us understand and to encourage us on how in our daily life. Also, as I mentioned, Francis de Sales' Introduction to the Devout Life. His book on the art of loving God, but premier book on love of God is St. Bernard's book. It explains the four levels of love, 4 degrees of love, with the ultimate being learning to love God in himself, which is pure love. That will give you more of an idea of pure love compared to temporal love. Human passion love, heart love, body love, and then on into 2 other degrees, and then finally to the ultimate spiritual, pure love, love of God in himself, love of God as love. God is love. So it takes it to a very spiritual level, which is where we need to be, because that's what we're going to be for eternity. Now, fine, I mean, it's no skin off my nose or back if people don't want to and want to continue on and live temporal Catholic Church stuff, and stay in that mode. And a lot of fear is generated in the temporal Catholic world. I've had this before with, I think it was the soup. Oh, do you have permission? Did you get permission? You know, oh, here's the name. You know, God gave me the name, the open door for it. I knew I was walking with a woman to a Bible study that we'd gotten started. It's Tuesday morning Bible study. And I knew, I was told within, as we approached this convent that was on the parish grounds at the time in my hometown, I was told, you're going to be given the name. Because I'd been wondering, what can we call this soup kitchen? And every movement needs a name, It's good. It's marketing. It's something, and it has to be meaningful. With me, even my dogs' names are meaningful. Everything's meaningful of names that I use. All my rooms in the house are meaningful. This is the resurrection room right here, where hopefully I will keep resurrecting every day, getting up. But, and spiritually though, also, where resurrections occur here. So, sure enough, I touched the door handle. Open door. We go in, and I told the woman beside me, I said, I've just gotten the name. I've just gotten the name. I was so excited. But I said, I'll just wait and get there'll be some kind of confirmation. I know there'll be a confirmation if it's the name. Because, you don't want to leap. But after a while, you get used to God talking to you, and you pretty much know. But right when you pretty much know is when the devil will try to trick you and imitate God's voice within. So you still want confirmation from God. And so you just sort of wait and see. And so I didn't know what the Bible study was going to be about that day. A religious sister led it. And it was the scripture in Revelation. And as we were going through it, verse by verse, there we came. I stood at the door and I knocked, and the door was opened. And I nudged her. I said, that's the confirmation. This indeed is, what were the odds of that scripture out of the whole Bible that the nun chose that day to talk about? And it resonated within. And we had a connection with a big Catholic publishing company. This guy who helped me with a lot of stuff back then, he worked for them. He was managing editor. And so he was all excited because, he'd seen my son driving me and me going up to house doors in a certain area of town, taking up something in a glass jar. This is when I was test proofing my open door, what Mary had told me to do, how to deliver and stuff. Don't make the people come, deliver to the people. And it didn't have to be just poor. Anyone who needed a touch of love. That was it. It didn't have to be financially based at all, or surgery or anything. Anyone who needed a touch of love. A lonely person who just could use somebody coming to their door once a week to say a few words converse a little bit and give them some nutritious soup and a dessert or a fruit and a muffin or whatever. We had like 3 things with it, soup and 2 other things. And then I also was told, have a saint note. That came as just a spiritual insight, and name the soups after the saints, because then the saints helped then. The saints then would make sure everything turned out delicious. We never had any bad food, because the saints would be like Saint Apollonia's chicken and dumplings. And the saint, it was her time, but we did not apple and dumpling, chicken and dumplings was the meal. That was like the third weekend that I did it. And when I was ill one time, a parishioner had brought over these chicken and dumplings, and she gave me the recipe. But that weekend, a saint was Saint Apollonia, and she had gotten her teeth kicked out. They had kicked out her teeth right before they were getting ready to throw Saint Apollonia into the fire if she didn't recant her faith. And of course she refused. They kicked out her feet, and she threw herself in the fire rather than letting them have the privilege. She had that kind of courage that she threw herself in after they kicked her teeth out. And oh, that just got to me so much. I thought, she's in charge of these chicken and dumplings, because the dumplings were so tender and soft. It was so soothing, and the chicken, it just like melted, and the broth and all, it just melted in the mouth. And I thought, oh, that's what it would feel good. She could eat something like that. So I always had connected with some reason because there's many saints every day in the Catholic Church. There are so many saints for every day. You can go to online and look up, what's today? February 4th, 3rd. And there'll be just a whole list of different saints for February 3rd. People you've never heard of. And then read about them and make a connection. And was it Apollonia that had her teeth kicked out? Oh, yes, and also then, or some saint who was given a choice basket of apples. I don't think it was her, it was a different saint. But I needed something else that weekend. I was doing this myself, and I was sort of running out of money because it kept growing. I went to this group in town that to ask if they knew of people who could use some soup, who would use a touch of love or some encouragement. So they gave me an initial list, and after the first weekend, word spread among people, oh, this is good stuff, and really nice, and it's free. And so it doubled, and then it tripled, and and then it went even more, like mega tripled. It just kept growing and growing and growing. And that's when this man had seen me, and also this friend of mine had seen me. She called a couple of days after the weekend and says, "What are you up to? What are you up to? What are you and your son up to?" She says, I saw you around my neighborhood, taking stuff to somebody. What's going on? What's going on? What are you up to? Because she knew me. And I told her, and she says, "Oh, I'd love my kids to be involved in something like this. Do you need help?" I said, "Sure I do." "Yeah, it'd be great. I need help." "You're welcome. In fact, I'm hoping for help." Because I says, it's growing so fast. So her kids, and she said, they started delivering. And then the man heard about it, and then that's how he got involved. He had a couple of boys. He says, "I want them doing something good like this on the weekends, after Mass and stuff." So they got involved, and he's the one that had the connection with the in-house art director of this major Catholic publishing company. And he gave him the name, said what we were doing. It was the Open Door, a Catholic outreach, except I would have changed it now to Christian. A Christian outreach, and then the hometown name in such and such. And so he developed a beautiful logo, a wonderful professional logo. It all was top class. God wanted it to be top class, and I like class. If you're going to do something, shoot for the heavens. Ask for the best from God. He'll deliver. He'll deliver. If he wants it, he will. And not just to be classy, but it gave it authenticity. Temporal people want to see something that looks like it's a real going concern. Because then the Protestants started watching. Because within 3 months, I had over 400 volunteers. And we were delivering, I think, a couple hundred quarts of soup And it was expanding. And then, within a few more months, we were delivering furniture. And a man from the parish lent us an empty warehouse he owned to keep all our stuff. We had a whole committee of men and women with pickup trucks willing to drive and do deliveries on call day or night of any kind of furniture. We were given the key to the warehouse. And then other people were donating. Oh, we've got a nice sofa, we've got bunk beds, we've got mattresses that are good, and all kinds of stuff. Nice coats. So we had all these items that we could start. When the delivery people would come back and say, well, oh, this family, they don't even have a sofa. The children don't have beds. Then, we'd ask, would you like some? Oh, yes. Then a delivery person for the delivery portion would go out. It was all in sections. And then we got the bus. That was a miracle, getting the bus. I'd had this flash. We were driving, Rick, this guy's name. Rick and I were driving a sofa out to a little side town out in the country, little village, where this couple lived in a mobile home and they didn't have a sofa. So it was a Saturday, we were taking a sofa out to them from the warehouse. And we were driving along, and I said, it was in the fall. I said, it's going to get cold, it's going to get rainier, more rainy, and these people down at this one tenement building downtown that were living there, it was a hovel. But I said, I've seen them, that they have to get to the doctor or to the laundromat with their bags of laundry, because there wasn't any in the building they were in. I was a mile away walking uphill, a pretty steep hill up through this town to get to a laundromat. In the rain and in the snow, I said, we need a bus. We need a bus. We turned a corner. I saw this little tiny yellow school bus parked in a gas station on a Saturday. I thought and it had a sign in it. I said, there's our bus. There's our bus. And Rick says, oh, it's just sitting. You don't even know if it's available. I said, there's something in the window. Get up, go faster, get there. I was so eager. For sale. Had a phone number. I said, call. So we stopped. No, did we have cell phones then? No, we stopped at a payphone. Called the number, or at least I didn't have a cell phone. Maybe he did. I think we stopped there was a phone booth. And he called the number, $500. I said, ask if we can take it and drive it for the day. Explain what we are. Oh, he'd heard of us. He'd heard of the open door. Sure, you can, here, I'll meet you at such and such a place, give you the keys. So I drove Rick's truck back. I'd never driven a bus. He drove the bus back to the parish. I said, park it on the back side of the church and of the gym and stuff, because I said, we'll surprise the priest. We'll surprise the priest with it. But I said, he says, well, we don't have $500. I said, well, God will provide. That was the motto that came. I'd already had that motto so many times. I said, God will provide. And we were getting prep done that Saturday evening to do deliveries. And a man from the other parish saw me, came across the parking lot, came over to me, because as we were going down into the school kitchen area to start working, and he says, I've had a really good month with my business. He says, I happen to have an extra $500 that I'd like to donate if you have a need for $500. I mean, talk about a miracle. Miracle upon miracle upon miracle. The bus worked fine. I need a little tweaking, but of course, somebody in the open door had a friend who worked on buses and other big trucks and things. And he says, oh, I'll do it for you for free. He had another friend who did professional sign painting and painting on vehicles. He put our logo and the name of our thing on the bus. So we bought it, we had it. The priest was a little bit iffy, he was a little bit nervous about it. Well, who's going to drive it? I said, we're going to have a team. We'll get a team of people willing to get a special license to drive that kind of vehicle with people in it. Takes a certain license. By that evening, just talking among the volunteers who were chopping the veggies, getting ready for the soup for the next day, we already had like 3 or 4 people. Oh, I'll do it. Some guy had just retired. Oh, I'm looking for something to do. I said, you'd be willing to be the head of the committee? Oh, it'd be fine. We'd like to. People like purpose and stuff. Anyway, that's how this thing grew and grew and grew. They were just miracles. But see, that was the priest then who ended up getting very envious. And the miracles and stuff, and he thought that I had too much power. God has the power. He knew not anything about the spiritual world. The priest didn't. He was very temporal. And turns out he was in big trouble. Years since seminary, he and this other priest were a homosexual couple. And still were. And then I finally said something to the vicar general. And he already knew about it. And I said something because that priest started going after my son in a bad way. So my son had to go to a different parish to get away from the priest who kept trying to get him alone, or he was so confident that he had so squished me after he'd run me out and done his sermons against me and stuff and turned the town against me, the Catholics against me. Not all. But this is a sad thing. Even this very good woman friend, she shunned me for 2 years. God rest her soul. And I asked her, why did you do that? Later, when people were talking again to me, some people. She said, well, I just didn't know that much about it, what was going on. So I just felt it was best not to talk to you, just to go along with, And I said, you knew me. But I didn't push it. Why? She was a temporalite Catholic going along with the shunning. Not wanting to buck what the priest wanted. He wanted me annihilated. And I was for that town. I left the town then. I had to. It was pointless being there. God had an assignment for me elsewhere. That was awful too. But I don't have to be in that world anymore. I kept thinking I did, or that somehow it was one reality, but it's not. It's not. The spiritual Catholic world is the one reality. The church that Jesus founded, which is the church, as long as we keep it, Christ is head and us the body, and stay on the narrow pathway within the church. It's our church. It's our lives. It's our souls. We have to be responsible. That's why I had to say, to the priest 1.5 years ago. No, I can't do your list of what you want me to do. It's some things I can't physically do anyway. Some things aren't in keeping with your canon law. And I don't know you, and you don't know me. You haven't taken the time to even meet 5 minutes with me. No can do. Not prudent, not wise. Would you obey someone you never met? Stranger danger. Yes, they're priests, but what kind of priest? That one was a temporalite, but a good one, very sincere. He's very sincere, and I bet you anything he wears an old-fashioned cassock, because a lot of times they'll wear those thinking it's more official, that it's more Catholic, it's more real, it's more spiritual. No, what we wear doesn't really matter. It's what we wear in our spiritual, in our soul, our minds and our hearts is what matters. And what we're wearing of the gospel, and if we're living it, of which I have a long ways to go on that. I have a lot of flaws. And one of them is still diddly-daddling with flashbacks. Because the devil knows that will take me back into the temporal and the ugliness. And there's no point in thinking about it. I've forgiven the people, but God needed to show me I had to learn. I had to grow up. I had to get out of la-la land and the idealism that I held, that everyone's to be trusted and everyone's good. And no, the devil is real, and people fall to the devil, including me. I've been tricked by the devil more than once. So, in fact, the person that has the devil tricking the person who's obsessed with me, that caused me to get entangled. And I just walked away from it. It's been quite a while now. Nothing to do with the person. It's just the same old dead end. Even what the person writes is just dead end temporal rehash of negativity about what I say and what I think. And what I think doesn't really matter other than the spiritual, other than what I say of what Jesus says. That matters. Here's the narrow path. Yes, it's narrow, and few are they who are on it, but it's the path I want you to take. And that's simple, and it's how it has to be if we want to spiritually progress. Now, we can wait and die and then start from scratch in eternity, learning the spiritual then. But why? Because when we see the temporal here, the temporal of the church, when people get into the temporal of it, I haven't seen anything positive that's been worth my energy and time that I got involved in. That was of temporal. Strictly temporal, I'm talking. Now, yes, the open door was temporal in action, but it was so spiritually based that we had soup miracles. This doctor, he was a maxillofacial surgeon. He was our chief cook. He loved it, and his wife, he loved doing the weekend cooking. And we had teams though, because he had times off. He didn't do it every single Sunday, but he would have if he could have. But it was better to spread it out. We had a broad base of volunteers. People who wanted to cook could do the cooking. People who wanted to do the prep work. People who wanted to do the shopping. People who wanted to do the baking. People who wanted to do cleanup. People who wanted to do delivery people. And we had several leaders of each group, because it's nice to have lots of leaders, because then they all have a vested interest. And if someone gets sick or something happens in their family, like after I was gone, somebody had cancer in their family, and so they couldn't be the leader of that particular group they were in. But see how it can go. Anyway, it was a beautiful, spiritual, wonderful, God provided, and swimming out into the deep, swimming on. So, and God provides. It's a beautiful world. The spiritual world is a beautiful world, and it doesn't, and it isn't, what am I trying to say? The temporal can be so beautifully filled with the spiritual. That's when you do have a oneness. That's when it is one reality. When it's spiritual, temporal. But that takes a focus, and it takes effort on our part, and to stick with it, because the devil will trick us and take us away from the spiritual. But what a great growth that we have in our souls when we give over to the spiritual. Swim on out into the deep, swim on out, and God will take care of those who get entangled in the nets, and God will take care of those who keep swimming and who learn by faith that it's not awful when we can't touch bottom. And something else we haven't talked about is our spiritual names, our heavenly names, the names we're given in heaven. That's an exciting thing. Those all have meaning for us. And I don't know, but I'm feeling that Sister Margaret Joseph, I've been calling her Heavenly Pearl. The name Pearl came to me. I asked the Lord the other day, what's her name in heaven? And Pearl popped in. So I looked up Pearl. And Pearl is a name for Margaret. Think of that. Who would have thought? And St. Joseph is he shall add, but I just enjoyed calling her Heavenly Pearl. Margaret, Sister Margaret Joseph. Maybe God calls her Holy Pearl, or additional, added to, because St. Joseph adds to. The meaning of Joseph is he shall add, or he shall increase. So heavenly increase, Pearl, pearl of great price. I've called Sister Joseph that, or Margaret Joseph, heavenly pearl of great price. I don't know. No, I don't have permission from the Vatican to call her that. I don't have permission from the Vatican to say that she's a saint. But I don't need one. No one's doing anything against the law. It's out of pleasure. It's out of love. It's out of delight in celebrating a beautiful soul that I just found out about a few days ago. I didn't know Sister Margaret Joseph prior to when she was sick and dying. Within 2 days, she passed away from this cancer. But no one's put me in the Vatican slammer. And if I find out from anyone that Margaret, her name in heaven is something else, it's okay. So I won't call her Heavenly Pearl anymore. No, do you see, we can take ourselves too seriously in the Catholic temporal world. We can take it all too seriously. And I can't even think of anything that I would ever do or say or think that needs any approval for anything. I don't need approval for naming my bathroom the Pool of Siloam, or the upstairs bath, or St. John the Baptist bathroom. Still working on the half bath. If any of you have any ideas, I like something to do with water. There's Old Testament has some wonderful water. How about, where the waters came out from the temple? Because my half bath is sort of centrally located. And from that, people from all over would use that half bath. Eventually when people who live in the house and use it as a normal house. So there's that. I don't know what scripture that is. Some of you will know. I like to just anchor everything in God, in scripture, in meaningful things of God. I have a heavenly name. I didn't know, but back in about is it 1995 in the fall or 1996, 95? It was when I found out I truly have a guardian angel in a big miraculous way. God told me, let it be known to me, because I was being very sarcastic. I mean, or just doubting, hearing these old ladies talking about their angel and giving them names and stuff. And oh, good grief, They didn't have permission from the Vatican to do that. Oh, I didn't think in terms of that. But I was very cautious, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do anything wrong. When I first became Catholic, I was like stiffer than a board, and even how I would be at Mass, and my poor son, hold your head, look around and see how other people do it. We got to do it just right. We want to do everything right here. All this external stuff. And then later I apologize. I'm sorry. Love's what's matter. God wants love. Love and adoration and prayer, humility. And he understands we're human, and that kids aren't going to sit up straight like they've got a board in their back or a rod up in their back like mine. Well, now I have little cages. They took the rods out, put these little newfangled cage things in, so it has more bend to it. But anyway, yeah, so I found out that day, but it was not long after. It was another rough week pain-wise. Both my daughters were off at college. My son was off to school, and I was just like, oh. I said, oh, I would love to know what heaven's like. I would love to know. And God said, I'm going to give you time in heaven. And I had a week of experiencing more of what heaven would be. And I was so excited with that I rushed off to the little chapel in the convent nearby where my spiritual dog had his apartment. But I could go over there. My godmother, we were very close then. It was before I found out she'd been grooming me to get into this dissent group, this a nationwide dissent group of angry religious sisters and some angry priests, but who want to do, it's temporal enough. Why have a temporal turf war over temporal stuff is what it is. Anyway, I went to pray in that chapel, and I said, well, if I'm in heaven, do you call me by my earth name, or do I have a heavenly name? And immediately God told me my heavenly name. And it was a name I wouldn't have thought. And I have to admit, I was rather rude. And I said back, well, that sounds like it was actually a commercial object at the time. It was the name of a company also. And that's all I knew of it, the name. I said, oh, that's like that. And he said back, you asked for the name, and that's your heavenly name, so don't complain. Okay, I'm sorry, God. That's what God does when we do something wrong. He chastises us, and we deserve it. And we apologize, and we shape up. And so I got home. I felt terrible. I had asked, and I had complained, because the name wasn't, I guess, what I expected. So I looked up. I thought, well, look up the word. Maybe it's better than what I think. It's a glorious name. The meaning of that name was such an honor I do not deserve. I do not deserve that name. And I apologized yet again, but then I thanked God for it. So I don't know if when I die, if I'm assuming that's what I'll be called, by that name. And it's fine. I love it. I use it in passwords and stuff now. And, I'm very pleased and very honored, humbled. And it's also sort of a word that guides my path now, because it's an encouraging word that sets the bar high, the standard high for my everyday life, because it has high expectations. That word meaning does. So see, there's just so much excitement in the spiritual world, and good. And yes, go, but the Mass is spiritual, see. The Mass itself is the most sublime of any of the spiritual experiences you could ever hope for. So people who say, well, I wish I had a spiritual experience. Like this one man, I wish I could experience an ecstasy like you do. I admit I was envious for a while, until I saw how you got mistreated and how angry the priest is and the bishop's mad at you. And he says, but I envied and I would love to have an experience. And the Mass is supreme spiritual mystical experience. The problem is we don't view it as such. I do. And I love it. And I guess maybe that's partly why God let me experience a little touch of heaven in the Mass. Not a little, a big one. It's the stairway to heaven. At the consecration is the portal, the mystic portal, where the priest is on. He's showing us through from the temporal to the mystical world, to heaven, to eternity. And Jesus, his cross, his crucifixion, it's all there in the Mass, and his resurrection, and the angels, and it's just all there. The greatest spiritual mystical experience on earth is the Mass, and you can have it daily. You can go twice a day legally. You can really go 3 times if you want. I used to go 3 times, but they technically say you should have a good reason. Just not be going, just to be going. They don't want people just to go to Masses all the time, like 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, with the idea that it's going to make you more special or more holy. No superstition involved with it. But you can go twice, and the exception for twice is usually if there's a funeral, Mass, or a wedding or something, that you've already gone to your regular Mass that you usually go to, daily Mass, maybe the 8 o'clock daily morning Mass you go to, but there happens to be a funeral that day, so you go to that, so that's your second one. But I mentioned it to Reverend Monsignor, and I told him, I said, I just love to hear the other homilies, the sermons, because at the cathedral, it was large enough, they had different priests celebrate each Mass. The 6 o'clock in the morning, the 8 o'clock, the noon Mass. And on certain occasions, there would be a 5 o'clock Mass in the chapel. So, but I would go twice. And then when I moved further, maybe once, especially if my back were terrible. But I loved hearing the sermons. I wasn't going so I could have an ecstasy. No. In fact, I went less after the ecstasy, depending on the Mass and whether I was going to had a higher risk of injury, especially when that mean old man was there who would pinch me down to the bone, and I'd be just bruised brutally up and down my arm. It was painful. After I came out of the ecstasy. In the ecstasy, it wasn't. So, but you see, so there's your spiritual experience if you want one. Just ask God to show you the mystic portal, to show you these things. Mm-hmm. Help you understand that the Mass is a mystical experience, and you'll start noticing things you didn't notice before. And love the Mass. Love it. And you'll fall in love more and more. And then love is God, love is God. Then you'll be united more and more with God. And do that with people. That's why forgiveness is so important. Pray for people, love people, forgive them, and then live our lives in love. And the way I talk, I know, mention these different people and stuff. It's not very nice, and I know my voice, it was awful. It was disappointing for me. Mostly I was just crushed because I was so idealistic. But I'm not anymore. It's just as well to not be idealistic. We're all human. We're all human. I am, I don't have the same standards for me, obviously, do I? Because I should be as idealistic for myself. Of course, I'm very disappointed in myself. I get very upset when I do bad things, and I don't like it when the devil tricks me, but that's my fault for letting the devil do that. The devil's very cunning, but it keeps us humble. Then you move on, so forgive yourself too. Pray for yourself, love yourself, forgive yourself. Then go live your life in the spiritual realm, everywhere, in your home. Your home is a temple because the Holy Trinity dwells within us. So that's why I'm so hepped on this. All the more now, the closer I'm getting to death, and all the more that I am in trouble pain-wise, where I think I'm still going to try to grout the rest of the fireplace. I have a shop light out there I can use. It's better in daylight, but honestly, I was just in too much more pain. But talking about this just gets the blood going and the oxygen going, and I get all excited, and my love of God and love of the church, the spiritual opportunities are there all through the Mass. The books we have, it's just the rosary, the prayers, I was going to read this prayer. I'll end with this, that this woman gave me, who I upset her too much, and it's okay. I wish she had told me that she just couldn't handle it anymore rather than just not answering the phone, but it's okay, because it was too painful for her. She couldn't hear this about the church, the reality, and still be okay. It's okay to see the reality of the temporal and still love the church, love the spiritual. And it's up to us to make it spiritual and to keep it spiritual, because that's what God wants of the church. It's spiritual. Take my hand, O Blessed Mother, hold me firmly, lest I fall. I grow nervous while walking, and humbly on thee call. Guide me over every crossing, watch me when I'm on the stairs. Let me know that you're beside me, listen to my fervent prayers. Bring me to my destination, safely along the way. Bless my every undertaking and my duties for the day. And when evening creeps upon me, I'll never fear to be alone. Once again, O Blessed Mother, take my hand and lead me home. That's, author unknown. I didn't write it. But it's an old little prayer or poem about Mary that this dear woman gave me years ago, this dear loving friend. And she liked me because I was the only one. They had been in the parish for like 10 years. I was the first one to ever approach her and talk to her and invited her to be a partner in prayer with a little child. I had started a partner in prayer program, but that got nixed because the priest and the people, they were some of the people who don't like spiritual, and the priest, he didn't like it that I started that. I asked permission from him. See, you have to ask permission to play your cards right with people who have big egos. You need to do what's right. Build them up, ask their permission, lay out your program for them, your idea, give them the credit for everything. We don't need any credit. We've got God. And then oh yes, that's okay. But then later he didn't like it, and it became so impossible to work with him that I just quit it. It was a beautiful program though that involved people in the pews with the little school children every day. The little children would write out one prayer on a 3x5 card, one prayer intention they wanted their prayer partner to pray for them. And all the us older people or whoever wanted had to do was just say their little prayer every day. You know, dear mom and dad, or dear God, please help my mom and dad not get a divorce. That was a heartbreaker one, and an important one, serious one. Or please help father's niece not die of cancer. And she had a miraculous recovery right after the prayer cards went out. That got to the priest, and he loved that program because of that. But eventually, see, he hated me so much because of I was spiritual, and people they don't realize they can have that. He would say, why does God do these things with you and not with me? And I said, well, I don't know. Ask God. I don't know. But now I would be able to tell him. Just become spiritual. Focus on the spiritual. Lead the people in the spiritual life of Christ. And that's all it takes. And then God will do with you as he wills. He wasn't doing anything different with me than he wouldn't do with anyone else. That's how it works. I mean, it isn't. And who cares, really? You know, we're not in it for the little gifts or the spiritual unusual stuff. No. We're in it for God. We're in it for God and for love and for the spiritual life. So, all right, I got to get going and see if the laptop will work. God bless his real presence in us, and God bless his pure love. We're going to go. I've got to get this figured out if it's going to work or not. I have no idea. No idea. Let me see. Got to get this. See if I can see. Light. I don't know how to get this. I don't know how to get this. Okay, I gotta get this. How do I get this? Huh. Don't know how to do this. I don't know how to get this to Huh. Hmm. Hold on. Hold on. Let me get this. Let me get this off. Trash. Empty. 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 Well, just wait. I'll take you out. I'll take you out. Just wait. Mommy lost it. Empty. Empty trash. Huh, I don't know. Let's go. Huh. It's gone. The movie's gone.